Nokia didn't die. Inside this building, the top management team faced extremely painful and emotional decisions. Its leadership team considered multiple options and ultimately recognized that the company has the potential to dominate the global network infrastructure industry. Actually, Nokia's renewal is one of the greatest stories in modern corporate history. They created this amazing campus, and it's very likely that your video is streamed through Nokia hardware and software. In 2012, Nokia's top managers were again in danger of emotional overcommitment to a failing strategy. They had chosen Windows with high expectations, but the sales figures were going down. A top manager told me, "We drove the Windows strategy like dogs, without any plan B in our minds. Whenever there was a bump in the road, we set about solving it as if we had no other options." Emotionally, it was commitment. We were committed to it. So the risk of inertia and failure was significant. However, they had a new chairman and a lot of experience with emotional difficulties, and they realized that this time they must use a different approach. They started managing emotions intentionally, and that changed everything. They went from not going to change the strategy to making a radical change with strong conviction and rescuing the company. The new chairman created a very structured process for strategy formulation that intentionally also contained and managed emotional reactions. One of the top managers told me that this process created certain kind of security or safety in the process. It was very engineering-like, and you knew what was going to happen and when, so the emotions didn't get overwhelming. How did that happen? How do you create this radical renewal? There were 4 specific practices that they used. In the first stage, the chairman focused on creating a more open discussion culture and removing fear from the boardroom. He explicitly emphasized that bad news are good news, so that everyone would bring up the negative information and get constructive responses. A key member of the strategy team told me that it's good and important to understand the background, which has left deep scars on the work of the board. They had made difficult decisions by a small circle of people under time pressure, and they had listened to their own people too much. And so they wanted to do things a bit differently this time. The board even made the CEO to present a slide entitled "What Keeps Me Up at Night" to the board, so that the CEO was encouraged to always share what he worries the most. And this transformed the discussion culture to be more open toward the new reality. The chairman also named golden rules for board discussion, and when someone didn't follow the rules, he would actually intervene. So in one instance, one of the board members had said something that made the CEO feel bad. Then after the meeting, the chairman took the board member on the side and asked him to apologize to the CEO in front of all the other board members. And in this way, he reinforced the respectful discussion culture. And one of the board members actually said that it was super important that they learned this new way of engaging in dialogue before they started talking about the content that was emotionally extremely painful and would make any dialogue difficult. Second, before rushing into any decisions, the new chairman really wanted the top managers and the board to update their understanding of the external environment and emotionally accept what is going on in the reality. That's why they created numerous scenarios of what might happen, what Microsoft might do, what Google might do, what else might happen in the world. And they kept talking about these scenarios so that they started feeling real. One of the board members told me that At one point, I spoke up and said to the CEO, we have to put the cat on the table. And that's a kind of Finnish way of saying address the elephant in the room. And then the CEO replied that in Canada, the expression is a moose on the table. And the board member said, I of course answered that given the size of the problem, it's at least a moose. It's not a cat after all. Another board member continued the example and said, so we had a moose up in the middle of the conference room table when the board and management group had a meeting. Little by little, we talked about even the most difficult issues. The second board member also said that the worst possible outcome was really bad, by which he meant Nokia's bankruptcy. And he continued, when even that was something that could be talked about, then it actually removed the fear from it, from the possible outcome. And then we were able to plan and prepare ourselves. A third board member said that we had terrifying scenarios that we were afraid to speak out loud because we worried that if we expressed them, they might come true. Like if you said in the boardroom, what if we fail? That's a pretty bad thing to say. You don't want anyone to sort of grow that sort of negative thinking. But at the same time, you must think about what happens if we fail. In the third step, it was time for considering options for Nokia. And in this process, the chairman told that they intentionally created many options and kept them alive for a long time because having options reduces emotional attachment to the prevailing strategy. And the idea was that whenever there was an option that someone suggested, they would start evaluating it. And for instance, when the chief financial officer, Timo Vuori, suggested that Nokia might consider buying back the network business from Siemens, the initial board reaction wasn't exactly positive because Nokia board had tried to divest that business for 10 years. But because they had this practice that they evaluate these options, they still considered the option, and then after a few rounds of analysis, it actually started looking like an attractive option. And in the same way, when they thought about divesting the phone business, everyone was initially hell no, but they still analyzed it and their minds changed. And in this decision-making process, they kept iterating between the options and their evaluation. And one of the top managers said, it was of course the entire path. All that time we had gone through the options with a fine-tooth comb. Since we had left no stone unturned, there was no longer anywhere to hide. You couldn't say, no, we still have to take time out and think about this or that. There wasn't any uncertainty about what options are left. And so we reached acceptance also on the emotional side. And that brings me to the fourth practice. Top managers didn't do the emotional work all alone, but they were heavily supported by analytical teams, both external consulting firms and investment banks, as well as Nokia internal strategy teams. And these teams would analyze every option in detail. They would even initiate collaborations and prototypes with potential partners and learn a lot of information about the options, which they then packaged and communicated to the top managers frequently. And in this way, top managers learned more incrementally, which changed their emotions and made them more open to consider the additional options and radical changes. And through this very iterative learning process, they moved from hating one strategic option to really seeing it as potential great future, and from loving an option, from being highly attached to the phone business, to understanding that they must let it go. And that enabled Nokia's radical renewal, which is one of the most amazing stories in modern business history. from steep decline to complete renewal, and they quadrupled the company valuation in just a couple of years. So, in your company, think about Nokia's lessons today. Your existing business is under threat due to AI or other external developments. Don't get paralyzed, but really embrace the reality. Internalize the unpleasant scenarios. Then create options or force your management team to create multiple options. Analyze those options with data, prototypes, collaborations, and other analytical and vivid means. And as you keep iterating, you come up with ideas that might save your future. Nokia is a great example of from decline to something as fantastic as this now here. In this channel, I continue to explain how strategy and emotions interact. Subscribe and become a better strategist.